Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another month of the Chichester Chats. I am Phil. Hopefully, we will see Lilith soon. But the star of the show is definitely here, Mr. dgchichester himself. How are you today, sir?
I'm good, Phil. Missing Lilith, though. Where is she?
I know.
Sending the vibes out, so hopefully she'll be here soon.
Get out of her coffin. I don't know. I'm hoping she's out of the coffin, just putting the dogs out or something, but...
There you go.
All right. But yes, today we're talking Daredevil 312 and 313. Yeah, I've been thinking about these for a while. All right, so am I safe to assume that these were a product of the Chichester, aka Chichester Foul? That was there like some kind of newspaper article or magazine article that said, about talking about arsons in New York City and like how many a year or anything like that?
That's kind of what I thought your opening gambit would be, and it's a good one. Obviously, when we're talking about stories that are this old. So for just a little context, right? It's an arson story starts in a pizzeria. There's a lot of shady characters involved, a couple of survivors, but somebody who's also killed in the process of it, and so Daredevil gets involved with some of the saving, and his Matt Murdock side obviously wants to get to the heart of the legal end of it. And so there's a certain mystery of discovering what was the cause of the arson, who was really behind it. Why are people keeping, some secrets? And usually when I either know off the bat, hey, that was something I pulled from somewhere, or in the course of reading it, rereading it for this type of thing, something will trigger. It's like, oh yeah. For the life of me, I have no idea. I don't know what it is. This thing is so, this thing is like chock full of I would call them in-jokes, in one way or another. The mobster, he takes the loan shark to threaten to destroy his car. Pete London is a character I've used a couple of times that's based on my grandfather, who had connections, so to speak. Oh, yeah. The dog is named Corky, which was my first dog when I was a kid. The fire captain, Captain Dan George, is my father essentially. Who was a fire captain, and that whole incident actually where he smashes the windows of the car, drags the hose through the window, is something my father actually did. Oh. Probably on more than one occasion, when somebody parked in front of a hydrant, and they were like, "Yeah, well, I'll move my car later," and they needed the hydrant. They didn't worry about it. They didn't try to snake the hose under the car. They just smashed the windows and ran the hose right through the car. So there were some little bits and incidents that I could. I picked up on, but looking at the pizza place, the pizzeria, I didn't say, oh man, that's that, or it wasn't based on that thing. And I can't remember a particular story of arson that maybe, happened in that way. It seems like there might've been a bit there. The whole piece with the woman keeping the pregnancy secret seems like so very specific that I feel like I would have, was that some kind of piece that I had read and filed away in that way, and then decided to insert it into this more dramatic story, maybe. But it feels more like trying to do some minor league Scorsese bit, or of like this very street character thing.
I just thought maybe you were just looking for an inner city mystery, and it's just
yeah, I definitely has that, and probably I'm sure fueled by some attitude around mixing things up with Daredevil, as I was trying to do at that point. Here was a bigger story against a villain, and then here's a more street level story to sort of balance pieces of it out. But I just couldn't. I wanted to say, oh, that was inspired by this, figuring that was my usual way in, but nothing came up as I was diving into it, and as we're speaking. It's not like suddenly the neurons are firing and going, oh, that was based on an incident, or pieces of it were, except for those things I just mentioned, which I could sort of check the boxes on. Okay, I know where I picked up that character or that dog's name or that thing. But there's a lot of really specific pieces to it. There's all, there's the missing photo, and there's the arson pieces. I have to figure, must ask my dad about arson. I just
there you go. There's your source.
Little bits and pieces. But again, that would have been when I was into the story, not what was the inspiration for it.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that if I ever had to write a story like this. My father used to be a city bus driver, so yes, I've heard stories. Yeah.
Right.
But Lilith and I were covered this, and we had a theory. Well, it's funny you say all these, the personal connections. The videographer, what is that? Video Vincenzo. We're like, we got to ask him. Was that like an old film school buddy or something? Or
again, he doesn't seem like he resonates with anything aside from whatever. He feels like he's a character that isn't an off the shelf character necessarily, but neither does he feel like, oh, that's my friend Vinny or my friend Victor or my friend whatever who was in the video. It was, the bit with the quarters feels very specific again, but I can't. It just whatever the vapors of time, or maybe it was just collection of little bits and pieces. The whole thing of putting quarters in your hand.
I love that scene.
And to create like a junior league brass knuckles. That's a pretty quote unquote standard way of toughening yourself up. I could see having that bit on hold somewhere and just giving it to this guy as he tries to make himself look better on video up against Daredevil. But he doesn't feel like he was based on anybody that I knew that was in the video. But it's just comical to see a character like that and this giant sized video camera he's looking around.
What was that? It was like early 1993. Yeah.
Yeah. But trying to be an early, definitely ahead of his time in terms of social media. I'm gonna film a video, manufactured video piece of myself to look better to the public. He was a trendsetter for today's social media influencers.
And that whole scene, like I said, you taught my 14 or 15-year-old self the phrase pro bono.
Well, yeah, the pro bono stuff. The conversation around that was a good balance, and definitely an interesting way to kind of get into that legal side of it. I wish I'd spent a little more time on the legal end of this one, just based upon the issues that were going on. The woman refusing to fess up to anything, and what the pro bono thing might have been doing in terms of affecting Nelson and Murdock. I mean, there's a lot of things that could have been played a little bit differently when I start to get self-critical. But I didn't mind the story as much as I did when you brought it up, last time we were together. And I was thinking, it's not one of my favorites. In my memory, it still has some issues. I think, it ends a little abruptly and it feels a little more filler in some ways than it does like it's really advancing the bigger parts of it. But I hate the coloring on the captions. It's just really weird to me.
Oh, really?
It's if you look at it again, it's all over the map in terms of colors, and a lot of them feel very the way it printed. They feel very oversaturated and kind of a little dark in terms of helping you track the read. I mean, if it's all Daredevil, which it all is, the captions are all his narration. For better, in some cases worse. Obviously, nobody was editing me in the way that they should have been. I think it should have been a consistent color for readers to sort of track. Even though it's always Daredevil, that's usually what I would have done as an editor, is keep the color consistent so the reader can always track that.
So who's in charge of that? The colorist, or
the colorist makes the choices, and usually a colorist is going to choose something, or always a colorist is going to choose something that works for the page best overall. So I can understand why a colorist would vary the color, because if it's a very dark scene or it's a lot of fire, in this case, in certain scenes, maybe they were trying to balance out those boxes, the caption shapes, so that they balance the page. But as I said, very often when a character has narration as a persistent point of the storytelling, you would give that character one color, especially when multiple characters did it. When I edited Martial Law, and Pat Mills and Kevin O'Neill had many different, twisted hero characters narrating different parts of the story, and they were jumping between, this is Martial Law's narration and this is so-and-so's narration. We varied up the color of the captions and even the caption shapes in some cases, so that the reader could track it better. That could get out of control if you have too many characters. But in this case, it was just the colors to me that were jumping around. And I don't know, at least on my copies, it looks like a printed dark, and didn't feel like it really contributed to the legibility of the read.
I mean, some parts it's dark, but yeah, I mean, I have the print, but I mean, it's not, like illegible or anything. You can read all it.
Some of them maybe should have been illegible. It always cracks me up. I really should have paid more attention, because again, the editorial office changes what was probably BS, like Daredevil saying something like this is just such BS, or some other character saying I never would have written bullshit or something like that, or maybe I wrote bull, but they always changed it to baloney, which just sounds horrible. It just rings so flat on the ear of like, you're full of baloney, as opposed to you're full of BS or you're full of bull. But
no, I mean, I know, like, when I mentioned this last time, you had thought, you had thoughts about, you didn't think this was the best story. I thought this one always comes up in my head when we talk about your run. Like, I put it up there with 304. I'm just like, you always painted him as the man of the people, and it's like,
right.
You put your money where your mouth is. 304, these two, I mean, 316.
No, that's really good of you to say, and I appreciate that. And it does, without a doubt, well, now having reread it, it's raised its level in my head, because it does check that box. His concern is just for, what he initially thinks is an attack on a neighborhood institution, and what does that mean for the people who own it? What does it mean for the woman who was trapped in the fire? What does it mean for her friend who was killed, with it? So all those parts are what drive him and what drive the story. So I think it does accomplish that, and I'm glad that works for you as a reader then and now. It just feels a little. And there's actually a little bit of a mystery that he does unravel.
Oh yeah,
it's not like it's really flat out simple. He does have pieces he has to put together to kind of get to the heart of it. I guess the way it does sort of rhythm itself out still feels a little like I had all these pieces, and then the way I brought them together was less elegant than I would like with 25, 30 years of perspective on it, saying that is a little too much flashback in some cases. He's cornering characters and saying what happened that night. It feels like it's got that I must have been influenced, I think, by some very non-linear movies at that point or something. It feels like it's got that vibe of those, not a Memento movie, but that type of feeling like somebody gathering all the little bits and pieces and doing a minor league Rashomon. In some ways, it's a test run for, what would be Daredevil 380, which is all collections of what happened, and then at the end you see the whole piece. Although that, I think, nails itself very well.
No, I mean, I like the flashbacks. I think they work for a murder, or, for this mystery, and especially, in the second issue. It's been a whole month since the first issue. It doesn't hurt to remind people. It's like, oh yeah, here's what we're doing. Here's what this whole thing was about. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. If I could redo it, I think I would have, his assembly of the pieces and then his confrontation of what is the ultimate villain and who is behind it, I think could have used a little bit more of a beat, and that could have extended itself out a little bit more, and maybe there was a little bit more drama to that than there was in the delivery. Maybe they could have had an enforcer working for them to help be a little bit more of a confrontation, not that it needed another fight per se, but something beyond what happens. Although presumably there's a beat beyond that, where after confronting them, he also brings the attention of the law on top of them to make their lives even more difficult.
Yeah, and like the second issue, I know you have nothing to do with it, but that cover kind of misleading.
Yeah.
Like the guy standing there in the trench coat, like, go to blazes, Daredevil, ha ha ha.
Exactly. So it does feel like it's promising something that's not, really there, in that way.
What, a comic cover of that era promising something that wasn't in the story? Get out of here.
I know. Any comic cover, right, promising something that's not in there. So it's a little, tricky like that. And for all the import of the woman, the one he's working for pro bono.
Yeah. Again,
I can be very critical. She needed the last scene, really, not just the confrontation. But I had clearly written myself into a corner in a bit of way and had to end the story. So, not that's not an excuse. That's just a mispacing, on my part. And at the editorial office, who was a really good, editorial office, in retrospect, should really have called me on it.
I mean, not a criticism, but yeah, that is one thing I would have liked to scene at the end. It's like just her walking out of prison or something and be like, oh, hey,
exactly.
happy ending. Yeah.
Right. Or or maybe it wasn't a happy ending. Maybe spoiler alert, kids, this woman is pregnant and she's trying to keep it from her mother. Mm-hmm. That's part of what drives her, her not fessing up to, why she was in this particular place at this particular time. But she deserved that. The character deserved that to really map the story out. So maybe it wouldn't have been a happy ending. Maybe her mother and her still would have been at odds if she revealed the truth about that. But it did need that moment with Matt or something to show that part of the story had been resolved. You sort of presume it once you sort of realize the guilt of the other characters. But it's not. And I love Scott, but this was some weird choices on his part in this book, too. His style was not yet evolving, I don't think, but Daredevil's like angry. The looks on his face throughout it, he's got a lot of grimacing, and also didn't, I think, help the visual part of the storytelling as much as it could have.
I mean, it's kind of set the mood a little bit, though, just Matt's frustration. He's trying to get all these people to help this innocent woman, and nobody really wants to talk.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true too. I think that you're right in that way, and Scott's interpreting, that he's bringing it to life. So it's just some of these. It's when I'm reading them, for prep for these things. It's a first it's a first impression, so that's what I pick up on as well.
But I forget what was I talking? I was talking about something else with somebody the other day, and we were talking about a 90s book, and questioned like the art choices, and like, was there like a pressure on some of these artists just be like, it's like, oh hey, look at the image stuff, and was there pressure on a lot of these artists to like, hey, maybe you should draw more like the image stuff because that's selling over there? And
some artists did catch that pretty hard, especially as image, picked up.
Yeah.
And I think, and some artists were hurt by it, demonstrably.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've talked about Herb Trimpe before, who always sticks out in my mind, but there were many, call them old school artists of real talent, who could still tell a kick-ass story and bring things forward, who were being marginalized and not being hired as the image, call it the image look, took hold, and short-sighted people were like, well, everything's got to look like this, and when these artists were being marginalized and then weren't being hired, even some who were like Herb on contract, so then they weren't being given the work that they were due in some ways. Not that the contract worked that way, but and then they were, so you don't draw like Image. This is the, this is what's popular now. So I don't know that people necessarily said you have to draw this way, but there was probably a sense of, well, this is what's popular. So if you want to be hired, you got to look at this and look at yourself in the mirror. And then some artists would try to do it, and they would be able to figure it out and make something out of it. And some artists would try to do it, and it was just so against the grain that it ended up being nothing. Right? It's neither as slick as Image in a way, and it's neither what you're really good at. But that wasn't anything we ever picked up on, to my knowledge. I mean, I've never heard from Scott or, hey, Ralph and Pat are putting pressure on me to do this or anything like that. Everybody liked what Scott was doing. And when Scott ultimately transformed himself and went in the direction that he did, with Fall from Grace and then later, that was Scott's choice. That was him wanting to evolve as an artist and taking the things that he was being influenced by and that he wanted to try out, and ran with it. And it not only worked for those stories really well, I think ultimately worked really well for Scott. Became who he would become.
Oh yeah, I mean, I always loved Scott's art, but yeah, it is interesting to see the evolution from like this run to like later on, like when he gets to Nightwing and stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
So you said you feel better about this two-parter now?
I do.
Read it?
And reading it and thinking about it in terms of the things you're saying too, it helps. I needed this therapy, Phil. And but you're right. It is that street level commitment. It is him down in the urban weeds, as it were, kind of getting right into it. And so again, I think that does work. The mystery again has some good parts to it. It's not right there in front of you. It does sort of, I think, sync up when you then see all the parts and the distractions and what's been misleading Daredevil and when it gets back onto the true of it. And hopefully that comes across ultimately to the reader as well. But I just think the climax is a bit abrupt and it needs that little denouement, in my film school terms, coming back to the fore to really have made it a stronger, piece overall. I think it would have played out, with a little less, couple 3 pages less of confronting the arson, the professional arsonist, and put those couple of 3 pages at the end, would have been a good rebalancing of the story.
But I like them threatening and then drop the engine block on the guy's car.
Oh yeah, no, I like that. There's a scene, the stuff with the loan shark is, I think that works pretty well in terms of opening things up. There's one scene, I can't remember which issue, but I think it might be the second issue, but he's confronting the arsonist, Benny the Torch. And so he's Benny's about to light up, I think, a Chinese food place, and Daredevil gets in his face and they have an extended fight, of course. And then Benny does something stupid. In the course of Daredevil then saving him from that, he himself gets burned and gets incapacitated. So we really don't get much out of him, except his arson case, which then Daredevil uses with the fire chief or the fire captain to, understand that, well, this guy's a real pro. He wouldn't have done what was done at the pizza place. This had to be an amateur job. So that connects those dots. But point being, the whole scene with the Benny the Torch, could have been a couple pages less. That was probably the 90s talking of, you need some overt action, you need big things. Again, nobody telling me to do that. That was just my sensibilities and pushing it in that direction, but it didn't serve the beats of the story. And especially when the character then becomes so incapacitated that, well, what'd you just do that for? I mean, how many times will we watch a show and, you know, the whatever, the side character is being pursued and then is killed, you know, in a moment. And why did you just waste all our time with that, you know, as a viewer, as an audience, if it wasn't going to pay off in some way?
I mean, that's what I was thinking when, you were talking about that ending. Like, I've seen like Law and Orders and stuff end like that too, and I'm just like, wait, they ended it that, and they ended it there. So I never know if it's like a personal choice or it's just, oh crap, we ran out of time, or.
Yeah, and sometimes like, right, the story's done. What else are we going to say? You know, how much? And sometimes stories do end that way, right? You know, it's just that's it. The story's over, and to drag it on even with a little denouement would be actually okay. We're telling the story after the story. But if the reason I say that, and I think you're picking up on that too, as a reader and a, you know, audience, is it's her story, right?
Yeah.
It's the other younger woman's story as well. Or at least she's the driver of parts of it. So she deserves that beat a little bit. That wouldn't have been, oh, let's spend a week with her and see how she's managing her life, you know, after she's been freed. You know, as you say, Law and Order, though, you know, maybe that was as much an influence as anything, because I love the hell out of that show, as everybody probably did, and you know, watched it religiously. And it does have a sort of a Law and Order feel to it, doesn't it? In the sense of the law and the you know, call the cop side of Law and Order the Daredevil side, and the law side of Law and Order the Matt Murdock side. Well,
that's what I was going to say. With the Daredevil story, especially, you're going to get that because he is a lawyer. So of
course. But it has that feeling of just the way Law and Order very often constructed its stories with misleads, and you know, Jerry Orbach you know, and his partner would be going down an investigation line, and then that ended up being shortchanged. No, it wasn't the, you know, it wasn't the Muslim guy we're going to initially suspect because we're all hyped up about this. It was he was innocent, and there was this other thing instead. So it has that feeling of, you know, pieces being constructed in that way as much as anything else.
But I mean, you did keep us guessing because, you know, they arrest someone in the first 5 minutes of Law and Order. You're like, well, this ain't the guy because they caught him in the first 5 minutes.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, for this story, but I mean, the girl, it's like, okay, I'm pretty sure she's innocent, but what were her and her boyfriend doing there after hours? It's like, I'm 99% sure she's innocent, but you're still leaving a wiggle room for doubt there, and yeah,
right, and then planting, you know, some of the seeds of, well, you've got to, you know, there was so much conflict, and I, in rereading it again, I do kind of like the overlapping structure of all those characters in the pizzeria at that one moment. You've got the owners, you've got the loan shark, you've got the arsonist, you've got the videographer. You know, everyone's kind of coming in and planting seeds in their dialogue, and they're ricocheting off each other, which then sort of says, okay, it could be maybe any one of these guys, you know, in a way. So it definitely has a good feeling there. But I still would have done it differently now.
Oh yeah, we were even joking around just with like all the celebrity pictures on the wall of the pizzeria and stuff.
Right.
I think there was I think there was a Spider-Man one in there. We're just like, you know, was that? Did you have any notes on that, or was that just all Scott's call? Be like, you know, who to put up there?
I couldn't remember. It either way. I mean, I could easily have said celebrity photos and you know, but Scott could easily, and said Spider-Man, but Scott could have just, you know, figured that out, you know, on his own. I mean, that was a standard feature, certainly, of any pizzeria you'd walk into, would be, you know, here's all the local and, you know, whatever celebrities who walked in here. That was sort of the photo wall, whether they were real or not. You know? Just seemed like that was kind of inserted in there.
Oh, but I know the one question Lilith and I had at the end. It's again, spoilers, kids. It was the owners of the shop for the insurance money.
Damn, Phil! Now you just gave it all away.
I know, for a 30-year-old story. I'm sorry, but no. Our question was like, he burns their check, and it's like, was there enough evidence to arrest them, or was that Daredevil saying, you know what, I don't have enough to arrest you, but I can make damn sure you're not going to get this money either?
I'm having to assume that's what I meant about the ending, right?
Yeah.
And being overly critical. Like, it's kind of dramatic for, him to burn it in front of them and then like to say, no, we've been found out. What does this mean for us? Obviously, if a check from an insurance company had been lost or destroyed, it's like, oh, we never got the check. Okay, check's never been cashed. Here's another check, right? That's not going to be a big problem. So he doesn't really achieve anything except dramatic flair, pun intended, in burning it in front of them. My presumption in rereading it, and I think it's kind of there in essence, is that he's got the story, and in between Daredevil's cred and whatever other evidence Daredevil could give to Matt Murdock to carry forward from the legal side, that would both get the woman off and nail these guys to the wall. Like, I didn't feel like, oh, he's going to be able to get her off, but they'll never be convicted. But I'll show them by burning this check, because that's asinine, right? That's just a moment in time. But that's where I get back to handling the ending a little bit cleaner and making sure that it's covered. And that could have been covered by you cut to a TV screen the next day in the court atrium or something, and it's saying, pizzeria couple, under investigation for, arson, scandal, blah, blah, blah. And just show that, okay, they're going down their road. And then, Murdoch standing out on the steps with the woman, saying, so what's next? It's like, and her just kind of holding her abdomen or belly and just saying, well, that's for us to find out, or some shit like that, right? So clearly two frames, two panels could probably have done it, and two nice size panels, and and felt like it was acknowledging all those things. I
mean, I just took it as symbolism. It's like, oh yeah, they burned this whole thing down. I mean, they actually, someone got caught and died in the fire. It's like, oh yeah, well, guess what? Once again, all your dreams are going up in flames. Yeah.
Right. Well, exactly. And that was that dramatically, visually, it pays off, no doubt, but it needs that beat, so I'll call up Marvel and see if they'll, maybe do a reprint of the story and, let me do like one more page to really kind of clean it up. So.
No, I see what you're doing. No, I think it's like, I mean, I don't think it's a bad end. Like I said, I could see a Law and Order episode doing that.
Absolutely. No. And you're right. Very often Law and Order episodes sort of just end on that moment, because that was such a tight show too, right? Once it shifted over to the law end of it, it didn't rhythm back to the crime side of it, right? Or I guess, it never went back to the other side. So who knows what happens on that side? So there could be a kind of an incompleteness to it. But that would have been an interesting way, because I think now that we're talking about it, I just have to imagine I was influenced and inspired. I mean, I didn't rip it off, but I think the rhythms of Law and Order and my fandom of that show, and living in New York at that time and being, or at least, or New York adjacent, and the way that Law and Order handled the streets of New York would have been a big influence. That would have been an interesting way to actually structure the story, like do it more specifically, again, treat the whole order side of it from Daredevil, and then shift the other side of the story totally over to Murdoch, and not bounce back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, you're giving credit to Law and Order, but if you're doing like an inner city like mystery story, I mean, isn't it going to look like a TV procedural? Whether that was your intention or not. I mean, if you, I don't know, just from the environment, or
you mean in terms of
just setting in the middle of the big city, and if it's going to be a mystery and you have suspects, I mean, isn't it going to look like a procedural?
I guess so. I mean, like I said at the beginning here, my first thought was Scorsese, just being who huge fan of then and now, and certainly film school influence and blah blah blah. So that was my first sort of street feeling, that whole sense of structuring things with these characters talking over each other, them all having these kind of greasy tough guy broken personas. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. If you go into then the procedural aspect of it, then Law and Order rules the roost in that way.
And I mean, you got your supporting characters in here. Yeah, Matt talks to Karen in the first issue. Him and Foggy are talking it out in the second issue. So
yeah, but that's I'm self-critical, and I think for good reason. But I think there's another place where, and this is I think what I'm guilty of like over and over again, is sometimes setting up things that I don't later follow through as much as I would like to in retrospect. Like the conversation with Karen could have actually had a little bit of a moment in the second issue. Maybe he's eating the crappy street food out in front of the courtroom instead of her, and they're watching the woman, come down the court steps, and she's meeting her mother, and it looks like the two of them are going to get along now. Maybe the mother is bringing, a baby carriage. I bought this for you, it's a peace offering kind of thing. And they're watching, well, Matt's not watching, but you know what I'm saying, from across the street, Karen could be saying, what are they saying? And he says, it's a peace offering, that would have been a good scene. And, but again, one or two panels. And then, the Foggy scene I like a lot. I like the, really? Come on, I get the blind lawyer, shtick, but, I'm not your videotape, you're not your video review system. That was due a scene in the other issue as well, or something, because there's so much new introduced in these that never then again get picked up on, except for Pete London. We don't come back to Captain Dan George. We don't come back to the Lone Shark in the same way. We don't come back to Benny the Torch. I introduce a host of characters that I then don't do anything with, which not that they were going to be main characters in any way, but if you're not going to do anything with them, then you owe it to the book's continuity characters to make sure that they at least are your thread. The Lone Shark looks like he should have had a role in the Grease story, though. Like that's shame on me for not bringing him back, because he was kind of fun. He was a fun thing, and it would have been again a non-real moment for the readers. But I could have brought the video character back for Daredevil, bringing him in to video all the crooks at the end of the Grease story to say, make sure you get this on tape. I want everybody to see it, to kind of discredit the whole bunch of them.
I mean, did you ever have thoughts of bringing any of these characters back, or is it? I mean, it might have just been time, because 6 months from now you'd be starting Fall from Grace, and it,
right. I mean, and then you upend the whole system, but I think again, I had many Achilles heels and have new ones, now. But I think that was sometimes the drive of doing things, and then just trying to be in a monthly schedule, and then not always putting all the pieces together as well as I should have in retrospect, whether I set something up and then didn't pay it off ultimately in the right way, or had these ideas for something and then just didn't actually play them out to their full extent. So nothing reading this, us talking about it now, I have more ideas. Not that I'm going to do anything with them, but I'm not going to call up again Marvel and say, we need a video Vincenzo, one off. But I could have seen again bringing that Lone Shark into the Grease story. He seemed like he was he was like perfectly fit for that.
Oh yeah, I would have loved to see that. But
right.
Yeah, no, just like I could see them even doing this story today, but just the wire act you guys had to pull off in the 90s, you couldn't do 6 months of this because everyone would be like, well, when's Venom going to show up? When's Spider-Man going to show up?
Right. And that was your own thing too. You had to rhythm the story against the sales type of things. And there was no, you have to keep bringing the readers just back in. And that's what you have to do, and figure out the way to do this in a good street level way. And maybe if this was a bigger part of an integrated story, maybe there was a series of arsons across the city, or across, Hell's Kitchen or whatever. And they start off small like this, and they're affecting a couple, 3 different lives. But ultimately you find out, well, they're all being driven by X villain, right? So then the story ramps up, and then that allows you to bring in, and you've got teases of the guy in the trench coat who doesn't exist on the cover with more meaning, right? There's a page or a scene, even in those earlier stories, where whoever it ends up being, has been hinted at, and then you get to a bigger payoff of, well, this is all part of it because I don't know, pick somebody, is burning down parts of Hell's Kitchen because he's got a deal where he wants to take over parts of it, something, and that ends up being driven by a bigger villain system who's now frustrated because Daredevil's in the middle of it and is going to confront it.
But no, like I said, I love these stories because you always painted him as a man of the people, and, this paid that off. It's not like, oh, hey, I'm a man of the people. What have you done lately? I punched Stiltman in the face for the 6th time today. So
Exactly. No, I'm really glad to hear you say that, and that came through, because that was definitely what I believed in, in terms of Daredevil, and still do. So I think that's, you've helped me raise this expectation, raise the impression of the story in my own mind by being able to go revisit it and seeing it again through your eyes.
Oh, yeah, because, you could maybe do this story with a Spider-Man or something, but yeah, I think Matt Murdock was a perfect fit for these stories more than any other character, so.
I just did a presentation the other day on... It was about building a brand, going to the marketing side of my life. And it was about building a personal brand, people trying to kind of create their own persona for their business and such. And the guy who was running it, wanted me to sort of conflate superheroes. How could people use the powers of superheroes? They're thinking about themselves as a superhero to build this personal brand. And it turned out pretty well. But one of the things that I lifted to illustrate this was talking about scale, and saying, in you creating your own personal brand, and you look at superheroes, don't just think about the bigness of everything, right? It's about scale. And the example I used was, Superman saves the world, right? Spider-Man saves the city, but Daredevil saves the neighborhood, right? And that's the, that was okay for the presentation, but it gets back to exactly what you're saying. It's the sense of that means everything to him, to be able to save this neighborhood or this block or whatever is as meaningful as important at that level. And he's the character who can do that.
Yeah. And I never mean to nitpick at modern comics, but it always seems, I know sales are always a big factor, but it always seems like it's a big event rolling in the big event. I'm like, I think we're missing some of this, these smaller human stories anymore.
Yeah, and I even talking, like I said, with having lunch with Fabian the other day, and nobody here, no listeners, took us up on finding me and Fabian in the city. We gave you the date, and we gave you New York City, right? What more do you want in terms of spotting us on the streets?
They're masters of the skies. You couldn't see through those glasses with the big nose and the mustaches. No,
that's right. We couldn't be spotted. But he was even talking, and he's done work with Marvel, in the interim, clearly, and I have not. But he was sharing, just some sense of a lot of things are just driven by more editorial committees and maybe those big story events, and then creators are often just hand it, this is what we're doing. We have to do this, and that's the direction it goes in, and those are driven by sales, and those are driven by events. but the continuity comics have always suffered for that. I mean, even back to the 80s and 90s, we were talking about, wouldn't it be better if we could treat this as as a series of limited series, right? As opposed to, going just Daredevil, it's Daredevil 482, it's Daredevil 483, and if it's just this story and it's Daredevil and it's kind of acknowledging the overall continuity, but I can have a beginning, middle, and end. That's a sharper experience for a creator and maybe for the readers, too, in a way.
I mean, I don't know if that's kind of what they're doing because, again, they always write for trades, I think. So a lot of your arcs are going to be definitely. Like 5-6 issues. But I mean, also anymore, it's like, especially at Marvel, it's like when a new creative team comes on, the series gets like a new number 1 and they like start renumbering and stuff.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily. I don't know that for sure, but my impression is that a lot of teams don't have that same length of time. They might come in for 10 issues or something.
Oh, yeah. Some people get 5. Some people might get like 12 or more. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think they're trying to bring in new readers with like, oh, hey, you can start right here, number one. But then for the rest of your fans, it's like, I got number 1. Well, which number 1? Did you get the one from 2 years ago? Did you get the one that, this one?
Exactly. Well, yeah, it's gonna disappoint some, some people who think they've got big dollars. I've got the number 1 of Daredevil. It's like, not so much.
I mean, they renumbered after Chip's first run, and Chip's still on the book. It's
did they really?
They did his first run, then they did the Devil's Reign event, and then they came back and did a new number 1. It's still Chip. I believe it's the same artist. So it's just like, oh, okay.
I mean, he's been on the book a while, but
I mean, he did like, he did like. I think he did like 35, 36 issues. They did Devil's Reign, and then they came back with a new number 1.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not like long enough to go back to number 1, but whatever. Somebody said, "Oh, this will work." I guess that's weird.
That's weird because that, and then he has Batman now, and they just they're still. Batman's one of the only ones who gets to keep his number. I think they're up to 128 now or something.
More? Oh, is it? I would think it's more than that. But
they renumbered it. Was it 2016 or something? But yeah, but since then, I mean, Batman's one of the other ones.
Is there anything that hasn't been renumbered to 1? There's like Detective Comics still running on
you know what? Detective Comics and Action, they're letting those they went back to their original, like during New 52 they renumbered, but they're back to their original numbering because they were able to sell issue 1000, so that for both of those, I think Action Comics is about to hit 1050, so that's going to be a big thing.
Jeez.
But yeah, a lot of them most of them renumbered. And
that is. I mean, that was a psychological factor. Again, going back 30 years. I mean, this was a conversation publishers were having. Sales departments were having. Editorial was having. Does a reader want to pick up? Does it feel like, even if the story is really well done, and it should be, right? There should be an entry point for a new reader. Does somebody seeing 428 on the cover or something make you feel like, oh shit, I don't even know? But because nowadays, if there's 16 seasons of something, of a TV show, I can flip through the streaming service and I can easily go back to episode 1 of Supernatural, and start in on there. But that's I don't know if there's any lessons to be learned, from that.
I mean, unless they're pushing the app, but I'm just like, I like the old numbering, but it's like, are they just like, oh, you can't go back and find, like, they didn't reprint everything in the 90s in trades. Now they do. They reprint everything, They put everything
it's
in a
awesome,
trade.
Actually.
Yeah.
It's like finally, like, holy shit! Somebody just showed me they reprinted a bunch of Judge Dredd stuff, and I only did like 6 issues of 2 different Judge Dredd comics. And I don't know if they're all in there, but it was like a trade of some of the Dredd stuff, which was great because I have a little place on the cover alongside Alan Grant and John Wagner, which is wow, holy shit! But they oddly credited me as Daniel G. Chichester, which has to be like the only time I've ever seen that credit. Used.
But I was going to tell you, there were gaps in your run on the Marvel Unlimited app, and I believe they've been filling that in.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was just double checking here, because before I think it jumped from like 300 to like right from Fall of the Kingpin, and there was a gap until Fall from Grace, but that looks like they fill it in that gap. So
well, maybe once people realized I was alive because I showed up at they said, "Oh wait, okay, well."
But yeah, no, I'm looking. They might have your complete run on here now. So
that's cool.
Now people can now these young kids can recognize your genius.
And there's that. And when we name check something, it's easier to say, well, you can find it on the Marvel app as opposed to having to go through bins. Not that there's anything wrong with going through bins.
No, I mean that's how we did it back in the day. That's how we rolled back in the day, kids.
That's it.
We had to go to 20 shops to complete our collection.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you find a surprise and a bargain.
Oh yeah, that's always the best. All right, I have no further questions for you, but
no, it's good, great conversation. Sorry, Lilith, we missed you. Hope everything's okay, and we'll get you next time.
He's probably still sleeping under a pile of 4 dogs. Oh, but I brought it up, but yes, next time, I want to talk one issue, Daredevil 316, the subway issue.
Okay, yeah, that's again, to my mind, a flawed issue. Good intention, but I'm going to reread it and come back in, and we're going to see how it holds up, because that was supposed to be the mirror to 304. So we'll see what it does with it. That's a good one to call out.
Yeah, we'll see how you feel, because again, you felt better about these after you read them, right?
I did. So we'll see how I feel about that one. Good stuff.
All right. So yes. What would you newsletter? Anything else?
Newsletter. Just going to plug the newsletter. Please visit storymaze.substack.com for my weekly newsletter. Sign up, and there's actually a new offer. Before I was giving away the plot to Daredevil 380, but now I've switched that up, and for Halloween especially, you can get the series Bible to the Clive Barker's Hellraiser comic, which was the guide that was sent out to creators when we launched the book to entice them to come work on the anthology. So this is real inside baseball stuff of how you create a world and position this to a creative team, and all the rules and rigmarole of hell and what we were looking for from an editorial point of view, which could be hell to other people as well. So kind of a fun read. Hasn't really been out in the world. So if you're interested in getting a free copy of that, subscribe. But even if you don't want to subscribe, you can just come check it out. And then you'll want to subscribe.
Exactly. And kids, yes, get that rare material that survived the computer crash of around the turn of the century.
Exactly. One of the few. You're right.
Oh, I'd be so mad.
No, it was devastating.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Again, thank you for your time, for your valuable time. And yes,
thank you, Phil.
We will reconvene in a month and talk Daredevil 316.
All right.
See
you then.
Thank you, sir.
Take care, Phil. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, kids. Another great Chichester chat. And remember, you can always reach us, CapesandLunatics@gmail.com, if you want to make a suggestion on what Mr. Chichester could speak to, one of his works. If there's something you want to hear him talk about, yes, CapesandLunatics@gmail.com, or call the voicemail 614-382-2737. That's 614-38-CAPES. And also, once we pick a subject, if you want to send questions in for the man, as you see every episode, he's more than willing to answer them. So, yeah, send in your questions. Chichester Chats, this show is on Facebook, on Twitter. You can find links to all our social media, the YouTube channel, our Patreon. Please support us there. Capes and Lunatics merchandise. Everything is at Linktree, linktr.ee/CapesandLunatics. All right, kids, join us next month. Again, yeah, we're going to be talking Daredevil 316. Once again, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chichester, for always giving us your valuable time.